Okay, so now you want to ultimately import some footage, a Photoshop file, so that you can start animating something. So, how do you import footage and files, vector graphics, anything like that into After Effects? Well, it's very simple. There's a couple different ways you can do it. The first way that I typically do is I just go into the project panel here and I just double click. And from here, I'm going to navigate to the file that I want. I'm going to select that file and I'm going to say I'm going to import as footage. Click open, merge my layers. Okay, and there we go. There's my Photoshop file. It's sitting here inside of After Effects. And let me show you the second way I would import. And if I want to bring some footage in, I would say File, Import, File, or multiple files, right? So File, I'm going to select my footage, click Open, and boom, there's my footage. So now I've got footage and a Photoshop file. If I decide I need to import multiple files at the same time, I could go to File, Import, Multiple Files. I could select the first file and the second file, click Open, and it's going to bring both those files in at the same time. From here, all I have to do is take a file like this footage, drag it onto my composition icon, and there it is. Now my file is in my composition and my timeline. I could then just take another file like this Photoshop file and drag it down here as well. And there it is on top of my footage. So in the project panel, we have several icons that we see down here. And what do these icons represent? Well, if we hover over them, because we had that preference set to show tooltips, we're going to see exactly what they are. So like this one says create a new folder. So we'll actually click that one and you'll see, boom, there's a new folder. It's untitled one. We can call it whatever we want to call it. Test. If I decide I don't want to call it test, all I have to do is hit return on my keyboard and rename it, whatever it needs to be named. I can then drag files into this folder if I want to do that. Next, we've got, well, if I back up one, we've got interpret footage. And let me show you how that works. So now we've got some footage in here. And if I click on this little icon here, it's going to say interpret footage. And it opens up this dialog box. And here I can just tell After Effects how it should interpret the footage here inside of After Effects. So when you bring footage in, it automatically tries to read things. Like it tries to understand what the frame rate is. So it says the frame rate is 23.976. Now I know for a fact that is the correct frame rate. So, but if I wanted to change it, I could say, hey, it needs to be 30 frames per second, right? And that's all I have to do. Click OK, and it's going to interpret it as 30 frames per second. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the frame rate from the file. I could also say I want to start the time code from the file or override that time code and use a different one. I rarely ever use this. I could separate fields, upper and lower fields. Back in the day, this was a big thing. Anymore, I don't have to use fields and pull down. Other options are if it's a square pixel, a D1, a widescreen pixel. I rarely change this either. Most things are shot square pixels that I work with. Here I can also say I want to loop this footage. So footage comes in one time, right? If this footage is, if I go up here in the window, I can see it's 20 seconds and 4 frames. If I want it to loop 2 times, it's going to double that. All of a sudden, it's going to play one time through 20 seconds, and then it's going to loop it again. And so it's going to be a 40-second clip when I bring it down here to the timeline. I can also click this button here called More Options. This is used more for things like red footage that has embedded color inside of it. And when you launch this, if there's embedded information inside the footage, this will open up a window and you'll be able to fine tune the color inside that footage. But this footage is just an MP4. There's nothing embedded, so there's not going to do anything here. Color management, I can click on that. I can also change the color management in here if necessary. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. We did create a folder. I'm going to show you that all you have to do is take the footage, drag and drop it, and boom, it's inside the folder. If I want to close it or open it, there it is. Keeps things much more organized. In this particular instance, we would have taken this footage and we would have drug it into the footage folder. And there it is. And it's actually stock footage. So boom, It's in the stock footage folder. Okay, we've also got other things here. We've got create a new composition. So this is going to create a new composition over here and a timeline based on this footage. So it's going to say, hey, this footage is 1280 by 720. It's 20 seconds and 4 frames long, 23,976. So if I take the footage and I just drag it on top of this, watch what happens. Boom, it's created a new composition that's 1280 by 720. And the footage is down here in the timeline, and the timeline is 20 seconds and 4 frames long, just like the footage is. It also built a composition that sits up here in the project window. Now, in this case, I would take this composition and I would put it in the comps folder. And depending on where this comp falls in my final project is where it would go inside of these folder structures here. Again, we're going to get into more detail about the composition and the timeline in a later video. Now, if I did not want to create a composition with that footage, all I have to do is click this button here, and it's just going to create a blank new composition where I can say, hey, I need to set up a new composition. I need it to be a certain width, a certain height. You know, a lot of us work at 1920 by 1080 or 2K or 4K. That's where we set up the width and the height, the pixel aspect ratio, which is typically square, the frame rate, 24, 2397, 30, 60, depending on how you work. The length we want the composition to be in the background color. But again, like I said, we'll talk about more of this later, and we can also name our composition here. We've also got a project settings button here that if we click, it's going to open up these preferences here. I rarely ever mess with this either. It's just things about expressions, which I wouldn't advise you to change. Audio, if you want to change to a different sample rate, it's going to be up in here. Color, we typically will work at 16 bits or 32 bits. Used to be 8 bits back in the day, but not so much anymore. You can also assign color profiles here. I typically will adjust the color by just going here instead of going into the project settings, clicking on 16 bits per channel, and I'll change it to 32 bits per channel and click OK. And then lastly, we've got a trash can icon here, and this just deletes the selected project items. So if I have something selected here, I can just click and it's gone. I can also just select here, drag down on top of here. Are you sure you want to delete this composition? Yes, I want to delete it. The great thing about this is I can also select multiple things. Like if I wanted to delete all of these 3 folders, I could select all 3 folders and I could drag these down onto the trash can and boom, they're gone. Okay, so that's the project panel icons.